All right, friends, welcome to Propresenter. This is going to be a lot to dive into, and I'm going to try to keep things very organized and clean. But there's a reason we do videos. It's so that you can go back and watch it again if it didn't quite sink in the first time. So as we dive in, just stay with me, and I'm going to try to break this up into chunks no longer than maybe 15-20 minutes so that we can kind of take things a bite at a time. And hopefully we'll get a lot of people who are fluent and proficient with Propresenter, and I think that's going to be a really good, healthy move for our team as a whole. So when you first open Propresenter, without further ado, let's dive in. This is what you're going to see. You're going to see kind of the tutorial stuff that Propresenter, that Renewed Vision Media, will start with, and they'll just kind of offer. You've got video tutorials you can check out. You can go look for some content and install sample libraries and all this stuff. We don't really want to do any of this particularly right now. If our system mandates this in the future, I will let you know. But first thing we're going to do is exit out of this. And then what you're looking at here is a song, and that's because that's just what's selected. So don't get too caught up on this for now. The first thing I want to explain is that we need to create a playlist. If this is programming for a service, then you need to start by identifying which service this is for. So we're going to, just for kicks and giggles here, I'm going to create a service for our downtown coming Sunday service. So this is the Nile Sunday playlist. And week to week, we won't change the date. We won't create new playlists for each individual service. We will just update one reoccurring playlist so that we don't end up with years of archived playlists that are just taking up space. Okay, so from here we need to populate the playlist with everything we need for the service, which will be found in our library, which is right here. And the first 8 documents of this library are numbered, and they have this little symbol in the front of them to keep them at the top of the library, because this reads document names in alphabetical order. And I want these first 8 to be accessible to me immediately. So if I search something, and it pulls up a bunch of different search things, that's great. But if I were to click out of that, at the very top, I will see the first 8 documents that I need to create my service. And so we're going to go ahead and start by selecting all 8 of these and dropping them in here. Boom. Right there, and they're numbered in order so that we don't have to rearrange them a whole lot. And then the only thing we're going to do is we're going to add one more announcement loop at the end. So at the end of service, just to keep things sequentially from top to bottom, we just kind of double up on the announcements. And so from there, we can drag and drop songs into the service that correspond to the Planning Center run sheet. And so it's actually a very simple concept. The details are going to be getting into updating the preliminary or the presentation documents. These 8 documents, they have to be updated pretty much on a weekly basis to make sure that the service elements are all reflective of that Sunday. So let's start real quick for the first 3. I'm just going to skim through these real quick. I just tried doing a recording of this, and it glitched on me, and so the first 3 are actually updated already. And so I'll just kind of reference them real fast. The announcement loop, the way we want to set this up is that if we're in a specific series, we want to make sure that the welcome slide and the series slide, anything corresponding to that series, is at the top of the announcement loop. The first thing and again, it's a loop, so it's not really like people see a start and a stop, but just so that we understand how we're progressing through a selection of slides, it's helpful for us to kind of prioritize them a little bit. So we start with our announcement loop. We start with our welcome slide. I'll go to the Vita Nova kind of generic basic slide that we have. This is kind of our promotional slide for the series. And then I'm going to move to the connection card, to the app slide, our general mission slide, our classes slide. I'll move into some of the youth slides, and then I'm going to move into, once the generic stuff is there and in an order that I like, I'm going to move into the slides that have dates. And so these slides all have specific dates or seasons or months associated with them, and I'll lay them out in a manner that I think makes the most sense. I'll usually start with the earliest date and kind of move to the later dates, but in that case, this guy would be up here. So it's not necessarily a perfect science, but just giving a little bit of thought to how the slides flow together is important. Now, on these slides, you'll notice there's a little clock icon and a little 8.0 ... All of this indicates that they're auto advancing, which is how we create a loop. There's not someone sitting here babysitting the announcement loop. So in order to do that, just so you know, you're going to select a slide, and then you can hit Control A and select all the slides at once, and then you're going to right click and go to Next Timer, and then you'll type in a duration that you want each slide to be displayed. Right now it's 8 seconds per slide, and then you'll click Done. And then at the last slide in the loop, we will go to Next Timer, and we'll check Loop to the beginning. And that way, and then you'll see a little arrow, recycled arrow symbol there. And then that will tell you that it's going back to the earliest slide. This is how you create a basic announcement loop. And then you can use the Go to Next Timer in things like sermons or song lyrics. It just kind of depends on what you need them for. The other thing I'm going to do is I want to specify, you see these little green icons up here at the top left of each slide. There's a difference between a background and a foreground, and I want all of these to be foregrounds. And I'll explain the difference here in just a second. So again, I'm going to click a slide, I'll hit Control A to select everything, and then I'm going to go to Media Queue Behavior, and I want to change it from background to foreground. Now watch what happens to the icon here. Boom. They're all going to become these handy little play icons, or blue, video clip play button icons. And what that tells me is that all of these slides now are foregrounds. And the difference is that a background, if the behavior of a slide is a background, then Propresenter says you can put things in front of it like text. So when we talk about motion backgrounds for worship, those have to be backgrounds so that we can put text and lyrics in front of it. If it was a foreground, then it doesn't matter what text we put on the slide, the foreground will kick that text off of the display, and it will just be the foreground. It will just be that motion background. So understanding the difference between foregrounds and backgrounds will help us make sure that we don't double displays and display things on accident that we didn't intend to display. So there's our announcement loop. And again, we want that at the front of service and the back of service. Now the service countdown, in order to understand from here the document's needs, you're going to need to understand what a hot folder is. So I'm going to go to the video image bin up here, and I've created a hot folder already, but just for the sake of showing you how to do it, you're going to go to the plus button, and you'll notice you see these plus buttons kind of all around. It's corresponding to the specific window that you're looking at. So right now, this plus button refers to the video and image bin. So if I click that and I go to new hot folder, I'm going to go to Google Drive, the Google Drive folder on this media computer, and I'm going to look for Series Media, and I'm going to click Vita Nova. Boom. And then I would hit OK, and that's what pops up. And so the system here is that Nate Parrish, our creative director, will send me a link to a folder in Google Drive that he populates with graphics, bulletin stuff, series buffers, anything that corresponds to that series, new announcement slides, etc. And I will then put that into my Google Drive computer folder that syncs with this. And I'll do that for all the media computers as we approach a new series. That'll be my job. And then we can create hot folders for that series folder specifically, and then you can have access immediately in Propresenter to all the slides that Nate makes. And so, for example, in the service countdown, we have a welcome slide. That comes from the Vita Nova series folder. And so if that slide, earlier it said slide not found when I tried to record this earlier, and so I had to create a hot folder, go find the slide, and drag it in. It's very simple. And the reason we have a welcome slide in the countdown is so that our traditions service prefers to use the welcome slide versus the 5-minute countdown. And just having both available makes it real easy for a media operator to choose which one they want to go with. The media countdown, again, we want this to be a foreground. So let me go ahead and go to media queue behavior, change that to a foreground. And the 5-minute countdown video is a countdown I found on YouTube. It looks clean. It does have music on it, but if we go to right click and we go to media properties, on any of the video files that are in a whole playlist, you want to make sure that your videos don't automatically loop. We've had that a lot. And so the way to do that is you're going to go to media properties and it's going to bring up this media queue inspector window. And then you'll go to your settings icon here and just make sure that you're not set to loop. You want to be set to stop. And if you don't want the audio for that video, you want to make sure that you take the audio down to 0. Or if you do, if it's a need to know video, you want to make sure you set it right in the middle at 1x. That just means that's the truest level. You can basically have the headroom to turn it up if you need to, but for the sake of consistency, we'll just leave it at 1x. But for the countdown video, we don't want the music embedded in this. We're going to play our Spotify playlist on Sunday mornings. So we'll leave the audio down. We've set it to stop, and we're good to go. And then we'll clear all and everything takes effect. So that's our service countdown. Let's move on to number 3, welcome and greeting. One note, so there's the welcome slide again. And the reason for doubling up on slides is because as we move from the top of service all the way to the bottom of service, there's going to be some slides that we want to recall multiple times. Like our logo slide is just a generic, safe thing to display. When we don't know what to display, we go with the logo. That's just kind of a rule of thumb. And so I'll put this same logo slide in a bunch of these documents, but I'll title them differently. So you can see this says, quote, greet your neighbor. That means, hey, welcome to Resurrection Church. This is usually after our worship set or our first song. Why don't you turn to someone next to you and greet them? And so this person knows, okay, while they're talking, that's what I go to. And then as soon as they start greeting each other, the band starts playing again, you can advance to the welcome slide. And so that's just a little bit of tips and tricks for you. The slide itself is not going to be in a series specific hot folder. It's going to be in the generic foregrounds or backgrounds folder. So again, the backgrounds, you got all your motion backgrounds. These are categorized as such. You can see the background logo there. Some of the logo stuff is in the backgrounds because these are PNG files, so they're transparent, so I can put them on some different, I can overlay some things in front of it. I could put text over the front of this if I wanted to. That's because that's in the background folder. Some of the foregrounds, though, you'll see these are, if they've got the text on them, the Resurrection Church text, these are more in nature. They're designed to be a foreground. They're designed to be a standalone. And so in the foregrounds folder, I'll drag and drop this into whatever document I need it in, and then I'll try to title it so that it's easy to understand what you're looking at. And then we have the first 3 documents of our playlist ready for Sunday. And again, we'll update this based on series changes or graphic changes and all of that stuff. All right, we're at about 13:40 right now, so I'm going to take a couple more minutes into this and dive into, let's talk about how we manage our media. So there is, like I said, there's a library. In every instance of Propresenter, there is a library. You can go to Open File Location, and when you right-click any one of these, and it'll take you to the folder on the hard drive that Propresenter is saving all of these documents to. This is where your library folder will be. Instead of creating, let me come to my frame here for a minute. Instead of creating a separate library for River Campus and a separate library for the downtown campus, a separate library for the youth room, all of those libraries, it just makes sense for them to be coming from one folder. The way to do that is through Google Drive. So right now the production department has a Google Drive account that has like 2 terabytes or something like that. And all of these instances of Propresenter at different campuses, in my office, on my laptop, all of them are pulling from the Google Drive folder, which means that if I update a song or a need-to-know document in one instance of Propresenter, it's going to update the document in the Google Drive folder. which means that the other instances of Propresenter are now going to see the updates. So you understand all of these computers are pulling from the same exact library. The thing you need to be conscious of is that means we need to really be organized with how we label things. It needs to be laid out in a orderly fashion so that we don't have one person at one campus creating a ton of documents, not knowing how to format them, and then the whole library becoming very disorganized very quickly. So if that makes sense to you, what I'll do real quick is I'll show you in Preferences how we set this up. First thing we do is we don't automatically check for updates, and we disable crash reporting just because that's how we do it. And you'll see in all of these little magnifying glass sections here, we see this thing, Users, Production, Google Drive. There's another one, Google Drive. The only one that doesn't reflect that is the support files. And under the Google Drive, we specify that we want Res, Master, Media, and Library. There's a library folder within our Google Drive, and that is the library that we're pulling from. If I were to go to the default library, that is a folder that's not in Google Drive, and it's actually on this computer. It's on this hard drive. And the library itself is actually, this is a collection of documents that, again, is in the Google Drive. And all of this is being copied to each one of these desktops through something called backup and sync. And so it takes what's online and it reproduces it on your hard drive, but it will continually sync with whatever changes happen online. And so this is our library, and the support files, we want to make sure that the support files are independent of the Google Drive. So this is actually directly on our hard drive, and this is things like the code files, the different JPEGs and thumbnails and things like that. These are things that can get messy if we don't really keep them clean. And so this stays on the hard drive. The media repository, though, we'll select custom path and we'll manage the media automatically. But again, that's going to come from the Google Drive, Res Media Master, and that's going to come from a folder called Renewed Vision Media. And this holds all of our, you can see down here, it holds all of our images, our videos, our audio files, our PDFs, imported images, and we have a generic custom path here as well. You may not necessarily need to know what all of that means. What you do need to know is that every instance of Propresenter is configured intentionally to sync with the rest of our Propresenter network. All right, and then from there, we enable copyright display. We'll get into that another time. And this is just the general tab. That's the only one I'll cover for now. The rest of these tabs and preferences are for another day. Okay? So I hope that makes sense to you. To kind of do a quick recap, we make a playlist. We have 8 reoccurring documents that we update on a weekly basis. Some of them need a lot more updates than others. We went through the first 3, the announcement loop, the service countdown, and the welcome greeting. We talked about hot folders and how series media content gets to our Propresenter window. That way we're not constantly downloading things from the internet and importing, and Propresenter's duplicating those files in different folders, and it just gets really messy. Using hot folders is a really helpful feature. We talked about the difference between a background and a foreground, and we need to make sure we specify what is what on purpose so that we know we are protecting what we display. And we talked about how we sync all of our instance of Propresenter, all of the media content, through Google Drive, and so we have one master library that feeds all of Resurrection Church's Propresenters. That is about it for this first video. We're at 19 minutes, so I'm going to sign off, and we'll take it up in part 2 with the need to know and the missions update and the offering, and kind of get into some of the more tricky programming things here. All right?